Well, it's Friday, and that means upper body day for me. So I'm starting out with dumbbell presses. One of my favorites. I used to do the barbell press a lot, but I had some shoulder injuries that I dealt with, and I found that by switching to these dumbbell presses, I really don't have that shoulder pain anymore, and I don't have to worry about the injuries. So back in the day, before the internet became big, well, before the internet really became anything at all, really, early 90s, late 80s, one of my favorite things to do was, my dad had a subscription to Muscle and Fitness magazine. So I would take a look at that every month. I was just starting to get into weightlifting, but I read that magazine every month. Really got a lot of inspiration from that. I would follow along with all of the bodybuilders' exercise routines and try to incorporate a lot of their programs into what I was doing. Really just gained so much inspiration and motivation from seeing those guys and how big they were. And I always dreamed of being that big, having that type of musculature. But one thing I didn't realize as a kid, and one thing they didn't say in the magazines, was the only reason those guys were so big were because they were also taking massive amounts of steroids. And I was too naive to realize that as a kid. I mean, especially in some of those interviews with some of those bodybuilders, despite how big they were, they would still claim, oh no, never take steroids, yada, yada, yada. Nowadays, it's more common for bodybuilders on YouTube and elsewhere. They actually admit they're on steroids, and some of them are pretty proud of it. They don't really care. They're just in it to be as muscular as possible, and they're obviously taking massive amounts of steroids. But I didn't really realize that as a kid, that all those exercise routines I saw in those magazines, none of those really work unless you're taking steroids yourself. The advice is worthless because when you're on steroids, anything works. Anything will make you bigger. Steroids just do that to you. Let me do another set. But anyway, that was really disappointing as a kid to learn that some of my greatest heroes, some of those most muscular guys, they were essentially cheating by using steroids. And everything that I thought when I was a kid, I couldn't achieve that without taking some drugs, performance enhancing drugs. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to build my body in a healthy way. But the only caveat to that is, if you do it the natural way, you're limited by what your personal genetics are. And unfortunately, my personal genetics has always been to be a really skinny guy. So I could build some muscle, but my genetics are going to limit me to where I never look like a bodybuilder. And most of us are that way. Most of us could never even get close to being that bodybuilder level. But I'm okay for that. I'm okay with that, because what I do with my weightlifting, I do for my health. I do so I'll live longer, be healthier, be able to get around better in my old age. But those guys that are taking steroids, they're taking years and years, sometimes decades off their life. You sometimes hear about these guys dying in their 30s and 40s because of all these huge amounts of drugs that they've been taking. It just takes a toll on their body. And yeah, they're bigger and stronger than everybody else, but some of them have taken half of their lifespan away. Me personally, I would rather have the extra time as opposed to having the muscular body. But yeah, so some of these steroids have terrible effects on your health, like enlarged hearts. Some of these bodybuilders that have died in early age, their hearts are twice as big at death as a normal person's heart is. So steroids just take a terrible toll on the body. Got to do another set. So yeah, so my personal recommendation to you is, if you've been listening to some of these fitness influencers on YouTube or elsewhere, and they're clearly bigger than genetics of humans should allow, stop listening to their workout advice, because it doesn't apply to you unless you're taking the drugs yourself. And like I said, any type of exercise will make you bigger when you're taking anabolic steroids. So any type of program works. But that isn't the case if you're just a natural bodybuilder. That isn't the case. You can only do so much because your natural body can only recover so fast. Steroids will make you recover 100 times faster than a natural person could. So you can do a much higher load and anything goes. But you have to be really careful as a natural bodybuilder. And you know, I know it's tempting to use steroids, but me personally, I wouldn't want to die in my 30s or 40s. I mean, I'm already in my 40s, but I wouldn't want to die at that age. I want to live to a nice, healthy, long, old age. So just stick with what you're doing. Be healthy about it. Don't take risks with your health. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.